You're 55 with $750,000 saved up for retirement. Your questions are, when can you retire? And when you do, how much can you spend? Today, we're going to meet John and Samantha. For them, retirement has a lot of unknowns. They're not sure when they want to retire, and they're not sure how much they want to live on during retirement. What we'll do is give them some options. We'll set 3 spending goals of $5,000, $10,000, and $15,000 a month. Then we'll run some hypothetical scenarios to calculate their optimal retirement age at each spending level. As a result, John and Samantha will be able to make an informed decision on how their ideal retirement might look. Hi, I'm Josh Palmer, Director of Financial Planning with the Noble Group. I'm a certified financial planner and have spent more than 20 years in the financial industry. John and Samantha turned 55 this year. John has about $320,000 in his 401k. He's contributing 5% of his $250,000 salary, and his employer matches 3% of his contribution. Samantha has $225,000 in her 401k. She's contributing 5% of her $100,000 salary, and her employer also matches 3% of her contribution. They have $210,000 in taxable assets in a joint survivorship account. When we're creating a plan, we have to start somewhere. We have to have a foundation to build upon as we work through the planning process. To build that foundation, there's 4 things we need to consider for John and Samantha's financial plan. When they want to retire, what they want to spend, how much they're willing to save, and how their assets are currently allocated. As we go through each of these variables, we'll discuss their current situation and their retirement goals while keeping in mind that as we get closer to retirement, we'll be able to fine-tune these if necessary. So our first discussion point is when they'd like to retire. John and Samantha both like the idea of retiring at 62 to coincide with their earliest eligibility for Social Security. The second item for discussion is spending. We first talked about their base living expense need, and it came to $60,000 a year or $5,000 a month. We then looked at implementing a tiered retirement plan. Now, what is a tiered plan? Retirement usually has different phases of income. For most people, they're going to want more discretionary spending for the first 10 years or so. As they get older, we'll phase that down. The next 10 years usually have less spending and even less towards the end of retirement, when we're often back to that basic living expense. For John and Samantha, they'd love to have $15,000 a month the first 10 years of retirement, about $10,000 a month the next 10 years, and to finish retirement, they'd want $5,000 a month. The third discussion we need to have is how much they're willing to save. As we learned earlier, they both currently contribute 5% of their paychecks towards their 401ks. Could they bump their contributions to, say, 7% or 10%? In our conversation, they told me that with current spending on the grandkids and small renovations of the house over the next 5 years, they didn't really have much positive cash flow at the end of the month that they could allocate towards savings. So in this case, we'll leave savings at the current rate and not use that as a variable going forward. The last point of discussion is their current asset allocation. John and Samantha have about 70% in equities and 30% in fixed income and cash. They did mention that over the last few years, the volatility in their accounts has spooked them a little bit and kept them up at night after a bad day in the market. Knowing their tolerance for risk is going down and will continue to go down as they age, I suggested we scale back their asset allocation to a more balanced approach until retirement and then take it back another step or 2 at retirement. So what does taking a step back mean? In this case, I'm referring to risk tolerance. We're going to reduce their risk by dropping their exposure to stocks, which are typically more volatile. Over the long run, this should smooth out the ride of the market. While we're not going to make extremely high returns, we also shouldn't experience extremely damaging losses. With their planned foundation set, here's what their goal worksheet looks like. You can see that their living expenses at age 62 of $5,000 a month or $60,000 a year are listed here. And as I do in all of our financial plans, I'm including healthcare as a separate goal. I do this because most of our clients before retirement are paying for healthcare before they get their net paycheck each month. At retirement, that changes because you have to pay for healthcare after you get your income along with all of your other expenses. I also want to highlight that anyone retiring before age 65 will need their own healthcare plan outside of Medicare. These can be very expensive. For example, a healthcare.gov Gold plan is around $900 per month. Now, once you reach age 65, we're able to switch you to Medicare, and depending on the coverages you select, that cost is usually reduced. You also see how I have 2 additional retirement goals. Here I have their phase 1 goal, which will be an additional spending for the first 10 years they are retired. And I have their phase 2 goal that will also be an additional but smaller spending amount for their second 10 years of retirement. We'll come back to these phased retirement goals later. So let's see what John and Samantha's base scenario looks like. This is retiring at 62 on $5,000 a month after taxes, with healthcare as a separate goal, and with their $750,000 in current assets. You can see that this scenario works extremely well. We're sitting at 99% probability of success, which is actually above our confidence zone. This means that if we went with this exact plan for John and Samantha, it's very likely they end retirement with a lot of money left over. If we get into the weeds of why and how this works, a lot of it comes down to the fact that the majority of their base living expenses are going to be covered by their Social Security at age 62. In this chart, we can see their first 10 years or so of retirement. Let's break down their first year. You can see that Social Security for both John and Samantha will bring in about $77,000 a year. Their total need, including base living expenses, healthcare, and taxes, adds up to about $105,000. That means we're pulling about $28,000 from their assets to fund that first year. Here's why this plan works. With their current asset allocation and their current savings, we estimate their $750,000 will be worth about $1.3 million at age 62. If we're pulling $28,000 a year from that $1.3 million, our withdrawal rate is under 2%. That is a very sustainable rate. And as you can see, as we get older, that withdrawal rate goes down because we're not eating into any of our principal. So looking at this, we might think our work here is done and we've optimized John and Samantha's retirement strategy. The problem is, we calculated this with only their base living expenses. This doesn't include travel. This doesn't include spoiling the grandkids or whatever else John and Samantha might want to do. So if they want to retire at 62 and live the same lifestyle they have now on just the basic monthly expenses, it's very achievable. But that's not how John and Samantha picture their ideal retirement. So let's do some more analysis and give them some more options. In our first alternate scenario, we'll give them $10,000 per month for the first 10 years of retirement, $7,500 per month the next 10 years, and back to their baseline of $5,000 per month through the rest of their retirement. I also want to adjust their portfolio allocation to a more balanced approach. This will help accommodate their lower risk appetite. With these new spending goals, their probability of success fell from 99% to 57%. The low end of our confidence zone is at 75%, so we need to make further adjustments to try to get them in the green. My next step would usually be to look at increasing the amount they're saving, but remember they told me that this really wasn't doable for them. So we'll just move on to the next variable, retirement age. At what age could John and Samantha retire to make $10,000 a month during their first 10 years feasible? Let's move their retirement back 2 years. So now they're retiring at 64 instead of 62. Immediately, this is much, much more doable. This is a good option that John and Samantha could talk about. By delaying retirement just 2 years and taking some of the volatility off of the table in their investment portfolio, we can increase their probability of success to a much more confident 88%. So how does this work? There's a couple reasons why this is more successful compared to retiring at 62. The first reason is that we have less time that we're paying for private health insurance prior to 65. Instead of paying for it for 3 years, we're now only having to pay for it for 1 year. We also have 2 additional years of savings and 2 additional years of portfolio growth. This combination of lower healthcare spending, additional savings, and additional periods of growth is what gets us to this higher confidence number. I now want to use this same principle for John and Samantha to show what it would look like to retire at the top end of their spending goal. If you recall, that top end was $15,000 a month for the first 10 years of retirement and then scaling it back after that. If I retire them at 64 with this higher spending amount, our probability goes way down, all the way to 21%. This is not something that John and Samantha can do. So we'll approach it the same way as before. How much longer would we have to work to get a confident probability of success at spending $15,000 a month? Let's push retiring back to 70. This will get us the largest possible Social Security benefit. It also allows even more time for savings and more time for portfolio growth. If we go this route, our probability of success jumps all the way up to 89%. So what does this mean for John and Samantha? And what does this mean for you? First, starting to think about retirement age 55 is exactly the right thing to do. You may not know what age you want to retire and you may not know how much you want to spend, but putting it into a plan is going to give you a lot of choices. If you go until the last day of your employment without a plan in place, your retirement age is set, and your retirement income is going to be determined by your assets and your Social Security payments. By starting to make plans earlier, just like John and Samantha, you're able to give yourself choices. You could retire at 62 on your baseline income need of $5,000 a month. You can retire at 64 on a middle of the road retirement income need of $10,000 a month. Or you can retire at 70 on your maximum retirement income of $15,000 a month. And the best part about all of this is that you can be anywhere in between as well. As we continue to meet with John and Samantha in the next 5+ years of pre-retirement, we're going to be able to update this plan and look at each one of these scenarios. If we have good market performance, or if John and Samantha want to fine-tune their spending needs, we can adjust the plan accordingly so that day one of retirement, they know exactly what it will look like from a spending perspective. And at the end of the day, the 4 things for John and Samantha to think about are the same 4 things that any of our clients should think about. And it's the 4 variables of any goals-based retirement plan. When are you going to retire is number 1. How much are you going to spend is number 2. How much are you going to save is number 3. And your current asset allocation is number 4. By making decisions around these 4 variables, we can build a financial plan and look at which ones, if any, we need to adjust to make it work. You've heard in many of my videos how I liken financial planning to putting in an address in a GPS. As we go down the highway, if we're going to come across a roadblock or construction, it'll reroute us. But in this situation, maybe I look at the exit it's telling me to reroute to, and I don't really want to take that exit. Nowadays, you can push a route button and it'll show you 3 or 4 different options to find another way to get where you want to go. That's exactly what we're doing here. We're giving John and Samantha choices, just as we would for any of our other clients in the financial planning process. If you have to be out at a certain age, then here's what you have to be able to live on. If you can work a little bit longer, that's going to pay off by having a higher retirement expense goal. But the key is twofold. First is having a plan before retirement when you still have the most flexibility in those decisions. And second is continually updating that plan as you go through retirement to make sure that you're still on the right track and going where you want to go. If you have any more questions about what we went over today, feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email. Have a great week, and we'll see you in the next one.